This is Criminal Interrupted. Before I begin this episode, I just want to touch on a few comments I've been getting recently about my voice being AI. I just want to assure everyone that I am a real person and that there is no AI involved. I do understand why people may think that though. I run my audio through the Adobe Audio Enhancer, which may give off that AI voice vibe, but it's just clearing up any background noise and enhancing the audio itself. I apologize for any confusion, and if people would prefer I don't use this, I'm happy to stop doing so. Now, on to the episode. In the world of true crime, we often look for clarity. A clear victim, a clear villain, and a clear motive. But in 1989, the Menendez case shattered that illusion, forcing the American public to confront a terrifying question. Can a murderer also be a victim? The facts are brutal. Lyle and Erik Menendez shot and killed their parents, José and Kitty, in their Beverly Hills home. They confessed, they were convicted, but the debate over why they did it is still raging decades later. Was the motive the $14 million inheritance, or was it a culmination of years of alleged sexual and emotional abuse at the hands of their powerful father and complicit mother? We'll dive into the high-stakes courtroom drama, the cultural impact of the original court TV coverage, and the social media movement that has pushed this case back into the headlines, and even back into the courts. Today, we explore the Menendez brothers' story. Get ready to have your view of victim and perpetrator interrupted. Lyle and Erik Menendez have never denied killing their parents. Their guilt on that point is uncontested. The central issue has always been motive. The brothers maintain that they acted out of fear and in self-defense after enduring years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse by José and Kitty Menendez. So let's start at the beginning with the parents. José Enrique Menendez was born on May 6, 1944, in Havana, Cuba, and emigrated to the United States as a teenager in the aftermath of the Cuban Revolution. A former colleague told the Los Angeles Times that José claimed to have been born into Cuban nobility and that his family was very aristocratic and very rich, until many of them were either killed or imprisoned under Fidel Castro's regime. José lived with family friends in Pennsylvania when he first moved to the US, where he earned a swimming scholarship to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. However, he decided to move to New York City and transferred schools. José chose to pursue a career in business instead, getting an accounting degree at Queens College. Mary Louise Kitty Anderson was born in 1941 and raised in Oak Lawn, Illinois, as the youngest of 4 siblings in a volatile household. Her father, Charles Anderson, was a harsh presence, producing a strained home life that ended with divorce from her mother, May. The ordeals of her youth left Kitty coping with depression and social withdrawal, as she struggled with the bitterness she harbored toward her father. Despite these difficulties, she maintained ambitions to pursue acting, enrolling at Southern Illinois University to study communications. While at university, Kitty's notable looks and engaging manner began to emerge, culminating in her winning the Miss Oak Lawn pageant in 1962. It was then that she met José Menendez. Kitty and José married in 1963 when he was just 19 and 2 years her junior. Despite concern from José's family about his age, he defended the decision, and the couple soon relocated to New York City. Their early years were filled with ambition and romance. José worked his way through Queens College, taking jobs such as washing dishes, while Kitty taught school. After the births of their sons, Lyle in 1968 and Erik in 1970, Kitty left her teaching career at José's request to focus on raising the boys. She had once dreamed of acting, but instead devoted herself to motherhood, often showering her sons with affection to balance José's long hours and growing absence from home. As José's career advanced, from accounting at Coopers and Lybrand to management at Hertz, then to RCA Records, where he secured deals for artists like Duran Duran. By 1986, he had risen to lead International Video Entertainment, later called Live Entertainment, steering it from debt to profitability through aggressive cost-cutting and high-profile contracts. Colleagues described him as ambitious, charismatic, and often domineering, a leader who inspired both results and resentment. Yet while José thrived professionally, the family dynamic at home deteriorated. Kitty, once celebrated as a glamorous housewife and attentive mother, found her marriage increasingly consumed by turmoil, much of it stemming from José's infidelities. When the family relocated to California in 1986, Kitty struggled to adjust to the new surroundings while contending with the mounting pain of her husband's repeated affairs. The betrayals eroded her confidence and self-worth, fueling a growing dependence on prescription drugs and alcohol. Over time, her mental health declined sharply, and she became despondent, even attempting suicide on multiple occasions as she wrestled with the reality of a marriage marked by disappointment and unfaithfulness. The instability between José and Kitty reverberated throughout the household, shaping the lives of their sons, Lyle and Erik. Determined to preserve the facade of a perfect family, Kitty concealed her personal anguish, but the strain was evident. Her substance abuse deepened the dysfunction, leaving the boys feeling neglected and trapped in an environment of secrecy and tension. So that was just a bit of background into José and Kitty Menendez, and now we'll talk about the childhood of their sons. Joseph Lyle Menendez was born on January 10, 1968 in New York City, and his younger brother, Erik Galen Menendez, followed on November 27, 1970, in Gloucester Township, New Jersey. The family initially lived in Hopewell Township, New Jersey, where both brothers attended Princeton Day School, a private institution that reflected their parents' growing affluence. From the outside, the Menendez family appeared to embody the American dream: wealth, opportunity, and a comfortable suburban lifestyle. Yet behind this facade, tension simmered. José was described as authoritarian and demanding. He expected excellence from his sons, particularly in academics and athletics. Kitty's role was more nurturing, but her struggle with depression and substance abuse affected her relationship with the boys. The brothers were raised in an environment where achievement was paramount. Lyle, the elder, was often seen as the more dominant and confident sibling, while Erik was quieter, more sensitive, and athletically inclined. By the mid-1980s, José's career had taken the family to Calabasas, California, and later to Beverly Hills. The move symbolized their ascent into wealth and privilege, but it also intensified the pressures on the brothers. Erik attended Calabasas High School and later Beverly Hills High School, where he was known as a talented but anxious student. One of the defining features of Erik's childhood was his talent for tennis. By his teenage years, he was ranked among the top 50 junior players in the United States. His parents invested heavily in his training, seeing it as a potential pathway to prestige and success. However, Erik's tennis career also became a source of pressure. He was expected to perform at a high level, and the demands of competition often left him anxious. Later testimony suggested that José's involvement in Erik's athletic pursuits was less about nurturing his son's passion and more about cultivating an image of family success. Meanwhile, Lyle enrolled in Princeton University but struggled academically. He was placed on academic probation and eventually suspended for plagiarism. Reports from his time at Princeton describe him as difficult to live with. He allegedly threw out his roommates' belongings and caused damage in his dormitory. These struggles highlighted a contrast between the brothers: Erik, pressured in sports, and Lyle, pressured in academics and leadership. Both, however, were shaped by their father's relentless expectations. In 1988, just a year before the murders, the brothers were involved in a series of burglaries in the Calabasas neighborhood. They stole more than $100,000 in cash and jewelry. Their parents discovered the thefts, And while charges were not pursued, the incident underscored growing dysfunction within the family. Accounts from friends, relatives, and later testimony suggest that the Menendez household was far from harmonious. Kitty, once vibrant and ambitious, reportedly became increasingly depressed and dependent on prescription drugs and alcohol. Her relationship with José was strained by his infidelity, and she often clashed with him over parenting. The brothers, meanwhile, were caught between a father who demanded perfection and a mother who struggled to maintain stability. Their tendency to be spoiled by Kitty, contrasted with José's harsh discipline, created a confusing and volatile environment. The burglaries in 1988, Erik's faltering tennis career, and Lyle's academic failures all contributed to a sense of crisis. When the murders occurred in August 1989, the shocking violence seemed to erupt from years of unresolved tension. On August 18, 1989, Lyle and Erik Menendez visited several gun shops across Southern California in search of handguns. Because of issues with Lyle's driver's license and the state's mandatory 2-week waiting period, they instead opted to purchase Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns. Using a stolen driver's license belonging to Lyle's friend Donovan Goodrew, Erik completed the purchase at a Big 5 sporting goods store in San Diego, along with boxes of birdshot and buckshot ammunition. 2 nights later, on August 20th, José and Kitty Menendez were in the den of their Beverly Hills mansion, watching The Spy Who Loved Me, when their sons entered carrying the loaded shotguns. José was struck 6 times, including a fatal shot to the back of his head. Kitty was hit 10 times, before the final blast to her face. She had collapsed to the floor and was crawling away. Lyle briefly left to reload with ammunition Erik handed him, then returned to fire the fatal shot. After the killings, the brothers lingered inside, expecting police to arrive at the sound of the gunfire. When no one came, they disposed of their bloody clothing and buried the shotguns along Mulholland Drive. They attempted to create an alibi by buying tickets to Batman, but abandoned the plan when they realized the stubs were time-stamped. Instead, they attended the Taste of LA festival at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. Returning home later that night, Lyle phoned 911 in a panicked voice, crying, quote, "Someone killed my parents," while Erik could be heard screaming in the background. When officers arrived, the brothers ran towards them, shouting. Police, however, did not perform gunshot residue tests that might have revealed recent firearm use. Both sons falsely claimed that they'd been elsewhere, with Lyle suggesting the murders could have been business-related, hinting to a mob hit. Investigators described the crime scene as one of the most brutal they had ever encountered, with blood and brain matter covering the room. Retired detective Dan Stewart later recalled, quote, "I've seen a lot of homicides, but nothing quite that brutal, especially José, as resembling a human you would recognize. That's how bad it was." Autopsy reports detailed catastrophic injuries. José suffered, quote, "explosive decapitation with evisceration of the brain," while Kitty's initial wounds struck her chest, arm, hip, and leg before the contact shot caused, quote, "multiple lacerations of the brain." At first, detectives pursued Lyle's suggestion of a mob involvement, given José's business ties and the savagery of the crime, but suspicion soon shifted. In the months following the murders, the brothers spent lavishly, nearly $700,000, on luxury goods, travels, and investments. Lyle purchased a restaurant in Princeton, New Jersey, along with Rolex watches and a Porsche Carrera. Erik hired a full-time tennis coach and competed internationally. They abandoned the Beverly Hills mansion, moving into adjoining condos in Marina del Rey, while also traveling to the Caribbean and London. Their courtside appearance at the New York Knicks game was even captured on a Mark Jackson baseball card. Much of their spending came from a $650,000 life insurance payout, raising suspicions of the financial motive. Family members, however, insisted their spending habits had not changed. Further evidence emerged when Erik's former friend, Craig Signorelli, told police that Erik had confessed to him and revealed their co-authored screenplay, Friends, which depicted a wealthy young man killing his parents for inheritance. Police wired Signorelli for a lunch meeting with Erik, but Erik denied involvement. Another friend, Glenn Stevens, reported that Lyle had rushed home to erase a new will from the family computer, fearing it would reduce their inheritance. A computer expert later confirmed he had been hired by Lyle to ensure its deletion. The breakthrough came when Erik confessed to his psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, who secretly recorded sessions with both brothers. Oziel's mistress, Judalyn Smith, later informed police of the tapes after ending her relationship with him. On March 8, 1990, Lyle was arrested outside the Beverly Hills mansion. Erik, returning home from a tennis tournament in Israel, surrendered 3 days later. Both were denied bail and held separately in Los Angeles County Jail. In August 1990, Judge James Albrecht determined that the recordings of conversations between Erik Menendez and Dr. Jerome Oziel could be admitted as evidence. Oziel had asserted that Lyle Menendez threatened him, which, according to the court, nullified the protection of doctor-patient privilege. Albrecht, sorry for my pronunciation, ruling was challenged on an appeal, resulting in a 2-year delay of the proceedings. 2 years later, in August 1992, the California Supreme Court upheld the admissibility of most of the tapes, excluding only the one in which Erik directly discussed the murders. Following this decision, a Los Angeles County grand jury indicted the brothers in December 1992 for the murders of their parents. The allegation that the killings were financially motivated was dismissed for lack of supporting evidence and removed from the charges. Ultimately, the Menendez brothers were charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with the added special circumstance of lying in wait, a factor that made them eligible for the death penalty. On January 12, 1993, prosecutors formally announced their intent to pursue capital punishment. The hearing, overseen by Judge Lance Ito, also resulted in the assignment of Judge Stanley Weisberg to preside over the trial. The Menendez brothers' first trial kicked off in July 1993. The trial became a media spectacle as cameras were allowed in the courtroom, broadcasting the proceedings on court TV. Lead defense attorneys Leslie Abraham for Erik and Jill Lansing for Lyle argued that the brothers had killed their parents out of fear for their lives after a lifetime of child abuse. This abuse, they claimed, included sexual assault, especially at the hands of their father. The defense presented a harrowing portrait of the Menendez household. José Menendez was described as a cruel perfectionist and pedophile. Lyle alleged José started abusing him at age 6, stopping suddenly 2 years later. Erik alleged the abuse continued until adulthood, shortly before the murders. Kitty Menendez was characterized as an enabling, selfish, mentally unstable alcoholic and drug addict who encouraged her husband's behavior and was also violent toward her sons. Erik testified that he finally told Lyle about the sexual abuse he was experiencing just 2 weeks before the killings, a confession that led to multiple confrontations within the family. Both brothers testified that José had threatened to kill them if they ever revealed the abuse. It was this fear, they alleged, that led them to purchase shotguns for, quote, protection and self-defense. The final confrontation allegedly occurred in the den of the Beverly Hills mansion on August 20th, 1989. According to their testimony, José closed the den's door, which they described as unusual. Terrified that they were about to be killed, they ran outside to load their shotguns. Erik recalled, quote, as I went into the room, I just started firing. For the brothers to be convicted of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter under California law, the defense had to prove they were in immediate or imminent danger. The prosecution, led by Pam Bozanik, argued that there was no evidence of such danger. She pointed out that the brothers purchasing shotguns in advance contradicted any claim of immediate threat. Prosecutors used the tape conversation between the brothers and their therapist, Dr. L. Jerome Oziel, where they admitted to having planned the murders beforehand. Bosnick also argued that the way they killed their mother was inconsistent with a self-defense killing, after they shot Kitty and she was still alive, quote, moaning and trying to call away. Lyle went to reload his shotgun and then returned to complete the murder. Prosecutors worked hard to discredit the sexual abuse allegations, asserting they were completely fabricated. They noted that no one had mentioned abuse taking place until the legal defense was being formulated 7 months after the murders. Jurors were told that the mention of sexual abuse was absent in discussions and tapes with José, and that Erik didn't mention it in his earlier confession to police. The prosecution continually asserted that Lyle and Erik were capable of lying repeatedly and in great detail to avoid being caught, and thus were also capable of lying about child abuse to avoid the death penalty. To demonstrate Lyle's capacity for deception, Bosnick played his staged, highly dramatic 911 call for the jurors. Lyle's credibility took a further hit when he offered to bribe his ex-girlfriend, Jamie Pisarik, to lie on the stand and claim that José had made sexual advances towards her. Pisarik reported this to the police. Before Lyle was cross-examined, he preemptively admitted to the scheme while being questioned by his own lawyer. The defense introduced witnesses to corroborate the abuse claims. Lyle and Erik's cousin, Diane von der Molen, testified that during a stay with the family in the mid-1970s, Lyle confided in her that José was sexually abusing him. Van der Molen claimed she told Kitty, but Kitty sided with her husband, accusing Lyle of lying before sending him upstairs. Under cross-examination, Van der Molen admitted she had never directly witnessed any abuse. Lyle testified that Van der Molen was the only person he ever told about the abuse. Another cousin, Andy Cano, alleged that as a child, Erik told him about the abuse, which they both described as genital massages. Prosecutors pressed Cano, asking if he would lie for his cousin, which he denied. The defense also presented 2 faceless photographs of young boys from the waist down, which Lyle alleged were taken by José when they were little. The prosecution argued that there was no evidence that José took the photographs, noting that they were found on a roll of film interspersed with pictures from a children's birthday party. Evidence from the taped therapy sessions with Dr. Oziel was presented in court over the defense's strong objections. The prosecution used the tapes to disprove the abuse claims, as the brothers made no mention of sexual abuse, and instead complained about their, quote, dictatorial father and suicidal mother. Lyle was recorded stating that by killing their mother, they may be, quote, doing her a favour, putting her out of her misery, and that they had, quote, shown great courage by killing their mother. Oziel stated the brothers didn't kill their parents for money, but rather out of hatred and desire to be free from their father's domination, messages of inadequacy, and impossible standards. Oziel also said that Lyle confided that, quote, he knew his father would have been proud of him for killing him, for pulling off the task. The defense fought back, arguing that Oziel was manipulative and controlling, and that he had directed many of the brothers' statements on the tapes. Oziel's ex-mistress, Judalon Smith, testified that Oziel wanted to control the brothers by taping their sessions. The prosecution challenged her testimony, noting that she was the one who initially notified authorities of the confession tapes, but had since joined the defense to discredit Oziel after a tumultuous breakup. I wanted to add some more disrupted evidence and legal rulings as well throughout this trial. Prosecutor Lester Kuriyama proposed that José may have been furious that his son was potentially homosexual and that this caused tensions rather than forced sex acts. Judge Weisberg refused to allow Kuriyama to discuss this idea, a move the defense applauded, calling the theory disgusting. The defense also won a key ruling against the use of the word sociopath in front of the juries. Oziel had told the court he explained to the boys the difference between a crime of passion and a crime of assault, and in response, they had described themselves as sociopaths. Judge Weisberg ruled that the label was too prejudicial. A defense witness, psychologist Ann Tyler, also described Erik's burglaries involving more than $100,000 in cash and jewelry as the acting out behaviour of an adolescent. The prosecution also wanted the jury to see a screenplay that Erik had written in high school about a wealthy young man who kills his parents for the inheritance money. But the judge ruled against it, saying that the play was written too long before the shooting to have any relevance. Interestingly enough, both verdicts for the brothers were divided by gender. Female jurors suggested voluntary manslaughter, while male jurors pushed for first-degree murder. After a month of deliberations, the trial ended in a mistrial in January 1994 due to two deadlocked juries. Los Angeles County District Attorney Jill Garcetti opted to retry the brothers, refusing to offer a plea bargain for lesser charges. The Menendez brothers' second trial was significantly less publicized because Judge Weisberg did not allow cameras in the courtroom this time. He believed it would, quote, increase the risk that jurors would be exposed to information and commentary about the case outside of the courtroom. This time, only Erik testified, detailing his alleged abuse by José over 15 days. He also alleged that José had told him he was written out of the will. Judge Weisberg limited some of the testimony about certain allegations and restricted the defense to a total of 64 witnesses in the retrial. Lyle did not testify in the second trial. The prosecution, led by David Conn, continued to focus on premeditation and fabrication. Jamie Pisrick testified about Lyle's attempted bribery from the first trial, claiming Lyle had told her fictitious stories about the mob killing his parents, which she initially believed. Conn told jurors that Lyle had asked a friend, Brian Eslaminia, to fabricate a story. Police found a 7-page letter, allegedly written by Lyle, detailing how he wanted Eslaminia to testify. Prosecutors also presented another letter, allegedly written by Lyle to his ex-girlfriend, Tracy Baker, that included instructions on how to testify, with the revealing sentence, quote, "We will decide later around what date this incident occurred." Prosecutor Conn challenged Erik on his allegation of being raped at the age of 18, when he had a vehicle and enough money to leave his parents' home, asking him why he didn't join the United States Army. Honestly, horrible thing to say to anyone, guilty or not. Erik maintained he wouldn't be safe from his father in the military, calling José, quote, the most powerful man I've ever met, and admitted that there were no witnesses to his allegations of sexual abuse. Defense expert Professor John Wilson testified that Erik showed symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which supported his abuse claims. Countering this, prosecution psychiatrist Park Elliott Dietz argued that the PTSD diagnosis was meaningless without proof of the underlying abuse. He noted that Erik didn't show symptoms of learned helplessness, as he had proactively purchased guns and practiced with them at the shooting range. Leslie Abrasom argued the brothers acted out of fear that the parents would harm them for threatening to reveal the family secrets, and that the killings were, quote, a highly emotional overkill. Crucially, Judge Weisberg determined that there was insufficient evidence to support the claim that the brothers were in imminent danger when they had murdered their parents. He allowed the defense to argue that the brothers shot José in the heat of passion, but specifically excluded their mother Kitty, concluding there wasn't enough evidence to indicate that she had provoked her sons. Clara Wright, the wife of the attorney hired by Lyle and Erik, testified that the brothers brought a safe to her home in hopes of locating a copy of their parents' will 2 days after the murders. The safe was opened in the presence of the brothers' uncles, but was found to be empty. Prosecutor Conn argued that this was evidence that the brothers were trying to access their parents' money as quickly as possible. Lyle and Erik Menendez were eventually convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances for lying in wait, as well as conspiracy to murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the penalty phase, Leslie Abrasom faced an allegation of professional misconduct for reportedly telling a defense witness, William Vickery, to edit his notes of meetings with Erik to remove potentially incriminating information, but the district attorney's office decided not to launch a criminal investigation on this. On July 2, 1996, the judge formally sentenced the Menendez brothers to consecutive life terms. The Menendez brothers' initial appeals were swiftly denied. On February 27, 1998, the California Court of Appeal upheld the murder convictions, and the California Supreme Court declined to review the case later that May. The brothers then filed habeas corpus petitions in the state Supreme Court. Even having a criminology degree, I did not know what this is. So, a habeas corpus petition is a legal procedure used by a person in custody to challenge the legality of their detention. But this was denied for the brothers in 1999. Having exhausted their options in state court, they moved to the federal system. Their petitions were denied by the US District Court in 2003, a recommendation that was upheld by the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit in September 2005. Decades later, in May 2023, the case gained new momentum. The brothers requested a new hearing based on an allegation that José Menendez had raped former Menudo member Ro Rossello. Rossello, who was signed under RCA Records, where José was an executive, appeared on NBC's Today in April 2023 and stated that José had drugged and raped him at the Menendez family's New Jersey home when he was 14 years old. The 2023 appeal also cited a newly discovered piece of evidence, a 1988 letter, allegedly written by Erik to his cousin, Andy Cano, in which Erik reportedly discussed the abuse. Author Robert Rand claimed to have found the letter in a dresser in Cano's bedroom in 2018. On October 3, 2024, Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon announced that his office was actively renewing the appeal. Just 3 weeks later, on October 24th, Gascon made the surprising announcement that he was asking the court for a resentencing of the case. If a judge accepted this recommendation, the brothers would become eligible for parole. Gascon clarified his position, stating, quote, "I don't believe that manslaughter would have been the appropriate charge given the premeditation that was involved." He also added, quote, "I do believe that the brothers were subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation." Gascon noted that his recommendation was based on the length of time the Menendez brothers had already served, in addition to their behavior whilst in prison. The resentencing process, however, faced several delays. An initial hearing scheduled for December 2024 was pushed back to January 2025. The hearing was then postponed to March 20th due to the Los Angeles fires. And on March 21st, it was pushed back again to April 2025. Then, California Governor Gavin Newsom announced a June 13th, 2025 deadline for the brothers' resentencing via his podcast. However, the political landscape shifted. Newly elected District Attorney Nathan Hochul reversed Gascon's recommendation for resentencing and filed an opposition to the habeas corpus petition. Hochul called the claims of self-defense, quote, "self-serving lies," and stated that the letter allegedly sent to Cano was not credible, given that it had not been used in either defense. Despite the new DA's opposition, in May 2025, a judge resentenced the Menendez brothers to 50 years to life. This ruling was significant because it made the brothers eligible for parole, as they were under 26 years old when they committed the murders. Their eligibility was short-lived. On August 21, 2025, Erik was denied parole by the California Board of Parole Hearings, citing ongoing rule violations and concerns about public safety. Lyle was also denied parole the following day, with the board referencing repeated cell phone infractions. Both brothers will be eligible for a second hearing in 2028. Despite their incarceration, both Lyle and Erik Menendez have found a way to marry while serving their life sentences. On July 2, 1996, Lyle married Anna Erickson in a ceremony conducted over the telephone. His defense attorney, Leslie Abraham, and his aunt, Marta Menendez, attended the service, which was officiated by Judge Nancy Brown. However, the marriage was short-lived. The couple divorced on April 1, 2001, after Erickson discovered Lyle was cheating on her by writing to another woman. Lyle married for a second time in November 2003. wedding Rebecca Sneed at a ceremony held in a visiting area of Mill Creek State Prison. The couple had known each other for about a decade before getting engaged. However, court records indicate that Lyle and Sneed separated in 2024. Erik married Tammy Ruth Sackerman on June 12, 1999, in the waiting room of Folsom State Prison. Tammy described the unique circumstances of the day, saying, quote, "Our wedding cake was a Twinkie. We improvised. It was a wonderful ceremony until I had to leave. That was a very lonely night." Tammy had consistently defended her relationship with Erik, describing it in a 2005 interview with ABC News as, quote, "something that I've dreamed about for a long time. And it's just something very special that I never thought that I would ever have." In 2005, Sackerman self-published a book about their life titled "They Said We'd Never Make It: My Life with Erik Menendez." She conceded on CNN's Larry King Live that Erik, quote, "did a lot of editing on the book." In a People magazine interview, she addressed the challenges of their marriage, stating, quote, "Not having sex in my life is difficult, but it's not a problem for me. I have to be emotionally attached, and I'm emotionally attached to Erik. My family does not understand. When it started to get serious, some of them just threw up in their hands." Sackerman also shared that she and her daughter drove 150 miles every weekend to visit Erik, and that her daughter affectionately refers to him as her Earth Dad. Discussing his life sentence in that same 2005 interview, Erik himself credited his wife, saying, quote, "Tammy is what gets me through. I can't think about the sentence. When I do it with a great sadness and a primal fear. I break into a cold sweat. It's so frightening, I just haven't come to terms with it." The media has played a central role in the Menendez brothers' case since the start. The resurgence of public interest in the Menendez brothers' case can be attributed to several factors. High-profile productions, such as Netflix's Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story in 2024, have brought the case to a new, younger generation. These new narratives often re-examine the original trial, particularly the claims of sexual and emotional abuse, leading to fresh debates about whether the trial adequately considered the brothers' trauma. However, the show didn't just reignite public interest. It sparked a fresh wave of controversy and a powerful backlash from the very people whose trauma it dramatized. The main criticism, which caused significant anguish, boiled down to one central ethical breach: exploitation without consent. A statement released by 24 members of the Menendez family, spearheaded by the brothers' aunt, fiercely denounced the series as a, quote, "grotesque shock drama." They claimed that the show was, quote, "riddled with mistruths and outright falsehoods," and expressed frustration that no one from the production reached out to them for their perspective. The true subject of the series, Erik Menendez, also released a statement. He publicly criticized the show for creating a, quote, "caricature of love rooted in horrible, blatant lies," and suggested its dishonest portrayal sets back the painful truths of their case. This is a critical point. The concern was not just about what was shown, but the fear that the dramatization could undermine the credibility of their abuse claims. Perhaps the most controversial element that triggered anger was the series' decision to hint at a sexual or incestuous relationship between the brothers, a theory which has been largely dismissed by journalists and legal experts close to the case. Critics argued that this sensationalized and fetishized the brothers' genuine trauma, turning a story of severe familial abuse into a lurid spectacle for entertainment. Ultimately, the Netflix series, while unintentionally sparking a conversation about male abuse and criminal justice, became a prime example of the true crime industry prioritizing dramatic license and commercial success over the well-being and dignity of real people still serving time for a crime rooted in trauma. TikTok has also been pivotal, with thousands of accounts and videos recontextualizing the case. Content creators, particularly young women, have been vocal in advocating for the brothers' abuse claims, criticizing the original media coverage, and viewing the brothers as victims of unimaginable trauma pushed to an extreme. This phenomenon has created a new, sympathetic network of supporters. And public figures, including Kim Kardashian, have advocated for the brothers, arguing that the case is more complex than a simple, greed-driven murder, and that the brothers, quote, chose what they thought at the time was their only way out. The story of Lyle and Erik Menendez has never really ended. It simply shifted venues. What began as a tabloid frenzy in the 1990s, centering on greed and privilege, has been fully resurrected in the digital age, largely due to social media and modern true crime documentaries that highlight the defense's claims of abuse and trauma. The most enduring legacy of this case isn't the murder itself, but how it acts as a mirror for society. In 1996, the jury struggled to accept the defense of imperfect self-defense. The idea that the brothers genuinely feared for their lives after years of alleged abuse. Today, with a much deeper public understanding of male sexual abuse, incest, and complex trauma, a modern jury might view the evidence, including the new allegations and newly discovered letter, through a far more empathetic lens. The recent decision to resentence them, even if reversed by a new DA, fundamentally acknowledges that the circumstances of their crime are not a simple tale of murder for money. As podcasters covering this material, we must confront the ethical dilemma inherent in true crime. Where does reporting end and exploitation begin? We've spent time dissecting a tragedy that is, for many involved, still an open wound. The current wave of public fascination, fueled by viral social media movements, often romanticizes the perpetrators or simplifies the narrative. As you've heard Erik Menendez himself express, he worries that the trauma and the death of two people can get lost in the translation to pop culture. The most responsible thing we can do when discussing cases like this is to maintain a focus on the complex interplay between trauma and criminal accountability. The core questions remain: did Lyle and Erik commit a premeditated, malicious murder for money, or was their act the tragic, disparate culmination of years of abuse? While the legal system has given its answer, the court of public opinion, and perhaps even the court of appeal, continues to deliberate. Ultimately, the Menendez brothers' story is a case study that forces us to question our own justice system. Can a conviction based on the standards of one generation stand unchallenged when societal empathy and new evidence suggest a different context? That is where we leave the case of Lyle and Erik Menendez for now. But given the ongoing appeals and the 2028 parole eligibility, this story is far from over. So I encourage you to research the facts of the original trial and form your own conclusion. Thank you for listening.